So chapter 9 is all about the product, and we're going to look at things related to packaging and positioning of the product. We're going to look at selling the product, and then the process that consumers follow in buying the product. So if we start with packaging, here you've got an example study, and then you've got a key study, which I talk about in a separate video. But one aspect we look at is gift wrapping. So Poroblev did this study, and it was a very much a qualitative study, did this study looking at how wrapping affected people's perceptions of a gift. So there were 3 different strategies that were used. You can see them there. She did this observation at a gift wrapping stall. She conducted 20 in-depth interviews, and then she held these gift wrapping workshops where she had pairs of people wrap 2 gifts, one for a friend or family member and one for an acquaintance, and then just listen to them talk about it. For this sample, they're all from the city of Victoria in Australia, and you can see there they're 25 to 35 years old, so they are relatively young. There's your big results that most of the participants preferred to receive a wrapped gift compared to an unwrapped gift, and that they had pretty clear expectations about how a gift should look. Here's the interview questions that she asked people, just so you can kind of be aware of them. This was, like I said, qualitative data being collected. Almost all of those involved pretty descriptive, detailed responses. So you can see some of those there. There's some specific ones that relate to about the effect of environmental sustainability. You can see, I like this one. Ned is my favorite. Ned was the guy who didn't wrap the book, but knew that it was supposed to be wrapped, so gave the friend the book and the wrapping paper separately. So these comments really reflect a pretty clear societal expectation that if something is a gift, it should be wrapped in a traditional manner. There was also the workshop. You can read through that if you like. That was the method section. I talked to you about it. And then you can see the results from the workshop procedure. So all of the gifts that were wrapped ended up looking like gifts. They had pretty traditional wrapping. Commonly it came up that people were more likely to play it safe with the acquaintance, pick something that if they thought would be like broadly applicable or broadly acceptable, but then they were more direct in like choosing colors and patterns for the friend. One part of the Poroblev conclusion was that gifts should be wrapped so that giver and receiver fall into their roles with no confusion. There's some samples of the gifts that were created during those workshops. And then we have attention and shelf positioning, because another aspect of kind of the packaging and positioning is, does it matter where it is on the shelf? Now, the Adelaide study is based on this previous research. We know that people are more likely to choose items that are in the center. So the Adelaide study set out to figure out why that is. Is it just because the item in the center gets more attention? Or is it because of this possible alternative explanation called the center stage effect? Maybe the store is already putting the best options in the middle. So the reason people are choosing the one in the middle isn't because it gets the most attention, but because it's believed to be evaluated more favorably. So to do that, Adelaide used eye tracking technology. He used undergrads. Generally, we had a procedure. He used vitamins and meal replacement bars. Generally, we had people look at a screen to make a decision, and then those infrared cameras were tracking the eye gaze and also those fixations, those moments when the eye stopped on something. So they were asked to review each product on the screen as if they were on a shelf in a shop, and then they hit the enter key, and then the item was presented to them on a 3x3 matrix. So the results were that the items in the center received more eye fixations and were looked at for longer. A big part of the Adelaide study that you want to be able to talk about is the central gaze cascade. So not only did people look at them more frequently and look at them for longer, but they especially looked at them for longer towards the end. So if you look at this shows you the gaze duration. You can see that the center item is the bold one here. So it gets the attention first at the very beginning in that first 5 seconds. And then people start to look at the other option. But when we get over here to the last 5 seconds, right before they make their choice, their eyes go back to the center. They cascade back to the center here for both meal bars and vitamins. So that's that central gaze cascade. And that's significant because that means that you are looking at that item in the middle right before you make your choice, which lends us some evidence or at least suggests some evidence for that attentional explanation rather than that center stage effect. So study 1A, the items were placed up there on the screen. The one in the middle was chosen 18% more often. The only thing that changed in study 1B was instead of the computer screen being right in front of the participant, the items were shown to the left or the right of the computer screen. So the items were not in the center of the participant's visual field anymore. So theoretically, I'll give you an example. Here, they're in the center of your field of view. And obviously, if you're going to pick the one in the center, you're going to pick Sevion. But if I move the items off to the left, like I did here, now it's actually Niron that's in my center of view. So if it's just about what's in the center of my field of view, then I would pick Niron. But instead, Sevion ends up being chosen more often. So even when in study 1B, the items were shown to the left or right of the computer screen, the piece still ended up choosing the item in the middle more often. Then in study 2, Adelaide said, okay, well, let's make this a little bit more realistic. Let's take this off a computer screen and onto a real life shelf display. It's still in a lab, but they did place these items on a real display. And again, they put the participants off to the side. So again, even if I was looking at the item, from the direction I'm looking at the item in the middle of the shelf is not in the middle of my field of vision. Again, the centrally located brand gets chosen more often, even when it's not in the center of the visual field. But it's not evaluated any more positively. So that gives us an answer, at least as far as this study. It very much seems that we choose the item in the middle because it gets more attention. It gets longer fixations. It gets more fixations. It is not that the item is actually believed to be to be a better quality. We find that's not the case here, but people are more likely to pick it. And again, that's significantly because of this central gaze cascade. As they get closer and closer to making their choice, that is the exact moment when their eyes also move back towards the middle. Here's a quote, a particularly salient quote from that Adelaide study. This matters a lot because that means that I can manipulate what people are going to choose. Sure, maybe stores would put the best option in the middle, but maybe stores would put the most profitable option in the middle, and that would drive consumers towards that, which would be beneficial to me. Now, if we get to 9.2, we get to selling the product. We're looking at two things here. We've got a set of sales techniques, and our sales techniques are, what are we focusing on? Now, of course, most ad campaigns, and an ad campaign includes not just commercials, but also like the slogans, the branding, the positioning, the way you talk about it, the whole ad campaign. Most campaigns do not focus on just one of these things. The sales pitches, the way that the salesman talks about it, are going to include multiple elements. But you need to be able to distinguish between a sales technique that is very much focused on the customer. We're asking questions to the customer. We're trying to tailor the sales pitch to the customer. We're trying to sell a solution to the problem the customer has. We'll get into that a little bit more with the Engel-Kohlhoff-Blackwell model. But here we're very much focused on the long-term relationship between the buyer and the seller, trying to promote that repeat business. That's our customer focus. Now, a competitor focus, on the other hand, is going to be focused on really direct comparisons between the product you're trying to sell and its closest competitor. Now, one of the best examples of this, almost every paper towel commercial I have ever seen shows the Bounty brand or whatever it is, paper towel, wiping up a spill, and then some other brand that's apparently not as good. And then they often don't name them, but it's like the other guy. If the Pepsi and Coke is a great example of this. Pepsi and Coke, they're similar in price. Their main goal is to prove that they are in fact better than the other one. We see this with Burger King and McDonald's. So if the ad campaign is designed around the idea that your product is better than the other product and specifically strives to show in what ways, that's a competitor focused technique. You also have the product focused technique. We don't care what the customer needs. This isn't about meeting some specific customer need. The product focused campaign tells you this is a great product. Here are the features of this product. It is excellent. We don't even really need to talk about our competitor because there is no real competitor to us. That's what the product focus technique does. Now, again, there it is there. It's not mutually exclusive. You're going to incorporate multiple elements, but you need to be able to recognize and talk about with specifics how, for example, a particular product that they're trying to sell, how they might use each of these techniques. Apple's a great example of that last one, that product focus technique. Apple in their commercials, they don't talk about Samsung. They don't dignify Samsung with any attention at all. Apple in their ads is rarely trying to be like, well, what is it you need? No, Apple says, here's an iPhone. You're going to buy it because this iPhone has all of these features and we're continually adding new ones. Now, if we look at the next part of 9.2, we're looking at Cialdini's 6 ways to close a sale. Now, the acronym here is R-Class. So all of these are ways that I can, when I've got you close, when I've got you there, you're in the store, you are thinking about buying, and I can tell you're on the fence. Here are some strategies I can throw at you to try to close, to try to get you to finally pull the trigger and make that purchase. Most of these are probably familiar. Sometimes there's some confusion about reciprocity. The whole idea behind reciprocity is if I give you something, you'll give me something. So if the salesman gives you something, the hope is that you will buy. So here we're offering free gifts. We're offering a free sample. Think about those people who stand outside of the Chinese restaurants and hand you their bourbon chicken. The idea is just if I give you this small thing, then you will probably come back and purchase from me. Commitment and consistency can be confusing to people. For one of them, we want to get, for one part of it, we want to get them to pre-commit. If we can get them to do something small, if we can get them to sign up to give us their email, then they're going to be more likely to eventually follow through. If we can get them to give us their email, then we can keep spamming them with messages about it. So then they're more likely to eventually buy from us. If we offer free returns, that makes it easier for them to commit. If I know that I can return this item, then I'm more likely to purchase it. Amazon is very good at this. I buy all kinds of stuff on Amazon that I am like, well, I may not even like it, but because I know I can return it. Now, I often don't end up returning it. By the time it's there, it's a pain. I'm like, yeah, it's good enough. It's a pain to return. But it gets me to buy more stuff. The other part of that is that people like to believe that they are consistent. People like to believe that they're not hypocrites. So if they've already done one thing, signed up for a free email, or given their email, then they're more likely to eventually follow through with buying the item. Now, the rest of these seem pretty clear, but I want to talk about influencers specifically because influencers can be confusing. If you see your favorite influencer using a product and you buy it because you like that influencer, then that's liking. That is the idea. If I buy the product because I like the salesperson, or I like the employees that I meet, or I like this celebrity and they said to buy it, or I like this influencer, then I'm buying it because of that, that is liking. Now, social proof is when they say stuff like, this is a bestseller, or they show all of these positive reviews. That is social proof that lots of people, the idea behind social proof versus liking is lots of people lots of people already made this purchase. Lots of people have already bought it. You want this. So if the idea is that there's multiple influencers and they're all doing it, you're like, okay, well, every influencer I know has this, then it becomes social proof. But if you're buying it because one person you saw that you like and you follow has it, then that's liking. Then, of course, we know about scarcity. Now, when we talk about our last part of 9.2 of selling the product, there's this strategy called disrupt, then reframe. So you need to know what disrupt, then reframe is, and then you're going to look at Cardes. Cardes did not invent this, but he tested it in this example study. So the idea is that if you disrupt someone with an unexpected message, so often it's this, the price is 300 pennies. Nobody expects to be told the price in pennies. That's weird. It disrupts their expectations. And then people have this thing called a need for cognitive closure. It depends, like the amount that you can tolerate ambiguity. Some people feel averse or against ambiguity. The amount that you can tolerate ambiguity like that it's an individual trait. Some people have a higher need for cognitive closure. So if you have a higher need for cognitive closure, you have more ambiguity aversion. Some people have a pretty low need for cognitive closure. You can tell them a message like the price is 300 pennies and then go, that's $3. And they're like, okay, I'm not going to buy. Okay, cool. I'm still not buying it. But what research has found is that using that DTR technique can reduce some of the counter arguing and makes especially people with a need for cognitive closure more susceptible when you ask them to actually buy the product. So Cardes tested this in 2 different field experiments. In both cases, the IV was, did you hit them with a DTR, a disrupt then a reframe, or were they the control group who only got a reframe statement? And then the DV was, did they behaviorally comply? So in study 1, did they buy the Christmas candy? So here are the results, just so you can see it. In study 1, we just looked at, were people who got the DTR message more likely to buy than people who got the control message? And the answer is clearly yes. 65% of people in the DTR group bought versus 44% of people in the control group bought. Now, in study 2, they added another element. They approached people on this campus in the Netherlands, and they gave them an assessment of their NFCC. They gave them an assessment to see how much need for cognitive closure they had, how much ambiguity aversion they demonstrated. And you can see that generally, people were twice as likely to join the group, pay the money to join the group if they were in the DTR group versus the control. But then they further segregated those results and said, okay, well, what about NFCC? Were the people with higher NFCC more likely to agree to join the organization? And they were. When we look at just the high NFCC people, 43% of them agreed to join the organization when they got the DTR message, and only 17% of those high NFCC people agreed to join when they got the controller, the reframe only message. And we look at the people with the low NFCC, and the difference was not significant. For low NFCC, 16% of people who got the DTR message agreed to join, and 7% of people who got the control message agreed to join. So the difference was significant for people with the high NFCC, but the difference was not significant for people with the low NFCC. So we would say that NFCC is a mediating factor that influences whether that DTR strategy will work on you or not. Now, last, we're going to look at buying the product. Here we have a model created by 3 guys. These are their 3 last names. The way you can remember this is PIACO. Now, I know that's not my best acronym, but the order matters here. This is a relatively straightforward concept. You look around and you recognize a problem in your life. You see a difference between your ideal state you'd like to live in and your actual state. And in response, you go out searching for information. You are going to look at external sources like advertisements, like internet research, but you're also going to look at internal resources like your memory of ads you've seen and your previous brand experiences. And then you're going to evaluate your alternatives. You're going to look at the possible options, and based on your motives, your beliefs, that kind of thing, you're going to choose something. I usually use the example of whether or not to buy an electric car here, because that one is a fairly obvious example of will your motives and the way that your belief systems in particular might influence your choice. Then you make a choice. You pick something based on all of that input, and then there's an outcome. That you'll also see this called the post-purchase attitude. You're either going to feel positive or negative feelings, and that's going to determine whether you become whether you purchase again or you become a loyal customer. Here's some examples you can look at, but I'll let you read that if you want to. But that's the Ingle-Kolat-Blackwell model. Then we have some research from Sinha about why people choose where to buy. And in this case, Sinha's study was done in India, and it was done at a time when India was transitioning from having more limited choice options and having kind of one store model to having a bigger variety of store models. So Sinha wanted to look at, well, what is it that is influencing what people buy? Or I'm sorry, what's it influencing where people shop, I should say. You can see there is the main method. It was actually interviews because it was done face to face with people, and they caught them as they were leaving stores. So it's a convenience sample. But there was a questionnaire with 47, I think, Likert scale statements, but also an open question. And the only results that Sinha really reports are for that open question where they ask them, what are the 3 reasons why you chose the store you're at? The main 2 reasons that made up 70% of the responses for their first reason were convenience and merchandise. And the nice thing about Sinha's results are they're pretty much common sense. It's fairly common sense that for groceries or like going to the pharmacy, you go to the place that's most convenient. But when you're buying actual products, like durable products, durable means like lasting, not like something you're going to consume, like books, music, and clothing, then you're more likely to decide based on merchandise. He found that Groups from 25 to 40 were some of the most discerning. They offered the most reasons, but for them, ambiance was ambiance was also important. Then he found some interesting results by gender. For males, 40% of them cited convenience and only 30% cited merchandise. And then it was a flip. So for females, 40% of them cited merchandise and 30% of them cited convenience as a first reason. And you could see that in the different motives that males and females said for why they were shopping. Men were more likely to view shopping as a chore that they just wanted to get done, whereas females were more likely to be willing to spend time and effort to get that better merchandise. Proximity was another thing that turned out to be important, but people were willing to travel further for good merchandise and a little bit less extent ambiance. You can see they said they had 96 responses that they categorized then. This is a lot of qualitative data, obviously, and that they had to sort and do a content analysis of to get the quantitative data. Only 40% of the respondents could actually provide 3 reasons. 70% provided 2 reasons. But for most people, it's a fairly straightforward thing. I included this here so you could see some of the reasons that were mentioned. This is probably the most important of the table here. You can see that when it came to convenience and merchandise, 32% of people cited merchandise as 32% of people cited merchandise as their first reason. 38% of people cited convenience. So for first reason, merchandise was a little bit more often chosen. If you look at the second reason, we have a switch there. But if we look at the total for all of the reasons, merchandise is a little bit higher, but not significantly so from convenience. So when we look at in total, they make up a huge portion of all of the reasons that people gave. You can look and see that the third most commonly chosen in total was service. Now, the last part of buying the product is kind of what happens afterwards. So this study by Nordval is about something called post-purchase cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is whenever you hold 2 feelings that are contradictory in your mind. You have 2 genuinely contradictory beliefs. This also comes up when you behave in a way that's inconsistent with your beliefs. So if you are a big environmentalist, but you consistently buy products that you know are a result of mistreatment of animals, then that should inspire a feeling of cognitive dissonance for you. Now, Nordval set out to study this in an interesting way. Nordval said this often occurs with organic food. We know that people say that they have concerns about the use of non-organic food. They have concerns about chemicals. They have concerns about ethical treatment of animals. A lot of people express that they would like to buy organic food, but we know that people don't always buy organic food. So Nordval said, let's look at post-purchase cognitive dissonance in a more everyday purchase in a grocery, a more low involvement purchase. Because we'll often see there's more research of this in high involvement purchases, but Nordval wanted to look at a low involvement purchase. So 100 participants, it's in a lab, and they did what was called a virtual shopping spree. The formula was rate, choose, rate. This is familiar to you if you think about Hall, if you think about the Hall study with the T's and the jams. So first thing, they were shown 50 common grocery items. 25 of them were organic, 25 of them were non-organic, and they were shown them one at a time, and they were just asked to rate on a scale of 1 to 7 for how frequently they would purchase that item. The whole point of this first rating was to find items that they would rate similarly. So then they would show them 2 items that were rated similarly. Their criteria for similarly was plus or minus 2. Their ratings on the 1 to 7 scale had to be within 2 of each other. So next stage was they showed them 2 items that were rated similarly, and then I had to choose between them if I was a participant. One of the items would be organic and one of the items would be non-organic. And then finally, I would be shown those items again from that choice situation, and then I had to rate them again on a scale of 1 to 7. And then I had to explain, and to be clear, I would be told this was your chosen item or your not chosen item. And then I'd be told to rate it again, and I'd have to give a reason for it. And they gave them these pre-chosen reasons here, and then they also could fill it in. So the hypothesis, of course, was that one of the ways that they might resolve their cognitive dissonance is that the second time when they had chosen that item, they might increase the rating. And we see that in the situation when they chose the non-organic option, which was way more often, there was a very small sample size of when they chose the organic item. When they chose the non-organic item, the mean that they rated it the first time was 2.62, and it went up to 2.9 for those same items that second time. So they showed an attempt to resolve their cognitive dissonance. They were like, well, I rated this pretty low, but I still chose that non-organic item. They end up rating it higher the second time. Now, another way that they could have resolved that cognitive dissonance is by rating their unchosen item lower. So they could have taken that organic item, which they did not choose. They could have taken that organic item and lowered its rating the second time around. But we found that they didn't do that. So they did raise the rating of their chosen item, but they did not in the converse way, they didn't reduce the rating of their non-chosen item. So you can see there's a lot of math involved here, but there was some attempt to resolve their cognitive dissonance by raising the item. This should have been positive. If they had done what they were expected to do, then this would have been done as a positive number. So it would have led to a number that was higher in dissonance. The ultimate conclusion is that they did not significantly attempt to resolve their cognitive dissonance. There was little evidence when looking at the total reduction that they were trying to reduce their cognitive dissonance by raising the rating of their chosen one and lowering the rating of their unchosen one. Now, when we look at their reasons for choosing, people who chose organic cited environmental concerns and animal welfare predominantly. People who chose the non-organic item cited price. That was their primary reason. Now, what was interesting is that Nordvall chose people who actually scored higher than the average on social responsibility. So these are people who were more socially responsible than the average person, so they should have chosen organic more often, but obviously the answer is people are good at rationalizing their decisions. They reduced their own cognitive dissonance by making excuses or by saying it was because of price or it was because of this. So in his conclusion, Nordvall says that the individual's ability to rationalize their decision makes it possible for them to keep acting in ways that are contradictory to their beliefs. Because people say that they want to buy organic. Parents want to buy organic. They want things that are better for their children. They want to make purchases that are more environmentally friendly and sound. And yet we don't consistently choose to do that because we're good at rationalizing it.